as you would have seen with our list online, the numbers have greatly reduced. So the intention of that is so we can collaborate with a smaller group and ensure that we can continue to improve the quality of the Endorsed Consultant program for the third-party certification scheme with Urban Utilities. Today, the induction is being presented by Erin Lloyd, our engagement specialist for developer services, Lawrence Chai, who is an engineer in our compliance team, and myself as the senior assurance advisor. Online, we've also got Bill Brensel, the team leader of our compliance area. So I'll jump straight in and get the session started. And for those who are a little bit late coming, if we can just keep muted unless you've got any questions, or feel free to raise your hand. I am going to be recording the session, so I'm pressing record at the moment, and I'm just waiting for it to, oh no, it's already recording, good. So we'll be recording the session, and we'll be able to record this session later on, provide the recording later on for any other training with your team, etc. So first up, we have Erin, who is a little bit sick this week, so hopefully she can get through her stage, and otherwise I'll jump in and support her.
Thanks, Michael. Good morning, everybody. We'd like to commence with an acknowledgement of country. In the spirit of reconciliation, Urban Utilities acknowledges the traditional custodians of country across our service area and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Michael, would you like to go to the next slide? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a little bit lagged, sorry.
No, that's fine. And just as an aside, if I am overcome with a coughing fit, Michael will kindly take over from me. And as everybody says these days, not COVID. So no shame in COVID, but okay. So again, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Michael. Here you can see the topics that we are going to cover this morning. We'll start with a general overview of Urban Utilities' role in development and the EC scheme. Then Lawrence will share some more information about the various components of the minor works process, including what you are required to do as an EC. And finally, back to Michael, who will discuss what it means to work together with us, our expectations, opportunities for collaboration and engagement, as well as some information on the other upcoming induction sessions. The goal is that by the end of today, you'll understand more about us and our role in development, and particularly why we have these processes and ask for what we do. You'll also understand the purpose of the scheme, your obligations to your customers and us, and also how we work together to build a network that we can all rely on now and for the future. There will be time for questions at the end, so please either put them in the chat or just simply wait for the end when we'll invite you to share those. Okay, so we can jump to the next slide. Alrighty. So with anything, it's really important to start with the context. So that is who we are and why we work the way we do. So when it comes to development, Urban Utilities is responsible for two main things. Firstly, the delivery of a reliable network designed for the future, well, now and for the future. And secondly, or at the same time, we're there to enable regional growth, strong economies and enriched communities. So we deliver these objectives in three ways. Firstly, as an activator. That means we work alongside state government and our shareholder councils and developers to open up South East Queensland for regional growth and stronger communities. Secondly, we are a regulator. That means we are responsible for upholding our obligations to deliver high quality network infrastructure and assets that are compliant with the water approval conditions and the SEQ code. What I want to emphasise here is that the community trust us to protect both health and the environment, along with ensuring reliability. So it's really important that we uphold these obligations that enable us to do this and deliver on what we're entrusted to do. Lastly, we are a co-designer. We work together with developers, with consultants such as yourself through a process of review and feedback based on best practice so that we can achieve the optimal outcome for everyone. Next slide. Thanks, Michael. So what is the Endorsed Consult Scheme? All right, so for customers, it's a means for them to undertake the design and construction certification of water approvals, conditioners, minor works in the most efficient and cost-effective way. More than that, though, the EC scheme is about relationships, foremost between yourself, urban utilities and the customer, who it's important to remember is also our customer. So we have that constant shared touch point. Being an endorsed consultant means that you are part of numerous relationships, as you can see in the diagram here. So we really do rely on one another to deliver the best outcome. It's important to remember these various relationships as you're undertaking the requirements of the EC program. And also in that, in order to ensure positive relationships across all of these stakeholders, it relies on communication, transparency, and information sharing. So overall, when a customer engages you or another of our endorsed consultants, what they are relying on is a certification material that you lodge for the issue of their connection certificate. And that only comes with the satisfaction of all of the conditions of the water approval. And when we say customers, we don't just mean now, today, or 2 years from now. We mean our future customers over the next 5, 10, 15, or however many years. You will hear us refer to up to 100 years into the future, because that is the expected lifespan of our network infrastructure. That's what we design. That's the lifespan that we keep in mind with our designs and assets, putting the assets in the ground. I do want to touch on terminology here. So you are going to hear a lot of references to applicant and agent. Now, if you've been an EC with us before, you've probably heard these terms used in the past, but we will definitely say that we didn't use them as consistently as we plan to do so going forward. So when you submit the application, you do so on behalf of the owner. So you are acting as their agent. The property owner is the lawful applicant. So there's that distinction there. You are the agent, your customer is the applicant. So when you're filling in materials, just keep that front of mind so that you can put the correct details in as you move through the process. The water approval itself will always remain with the property owner. And it's worth understanding that in case the applicant, for whatever reason, decides to change agents at some time through the process, the water approval will go with them. Look, as the agent acting on behalf of the applicant, it does mean that for the most part, you will take care of managing the entire application. However, it's important to mention as well, there are occasions instead where the customer may choose to manage this themselves and work with you in that way. Next slide. Thanks, Michael. Okay. So our shared values. What do we expect and what do our customers expect? They really do go hand in hand. So meeting the standards that customers expect comes down to delivering on our shared values of accountability, risk, and quality. And these are values that are held by urban utilities, not just simply that something we're throwing out there for the purposes of today's session, but rather these are values that are really deeply embedded in our organisation. So accountability refers to the responsibility we have to answer to our 5 council shareholders, as well as ensuring that we meet our lawful obligations as a water retailer and distributor. Risk management refers to the way in which we are proactively engaging our customers and community to handle issues, minimise risk and protect our reputation. So this really is part of our core business and it is the foundation of great relationships. As an urban utilities endorsed consultant, we do ask that you consider all of these in the way you consider these in the way we work together for our shared customers. So lastly, when we talk about quality as a driver, we mean the degree of excellence our service delivers. We're committed to providing high quality, strong customer service and community engagement. So these values are not just expected of all urban utilities staff, but we do expect that our endorsed consultants adopt the same approach when undertaking work on our behalf. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Michael and Lawrence, who are going to tell us a little bit more about the components of the scheme.
Okay.
Thanks, and I look forward to working together.
Thanks, Aaron. I can see, Greg, you've got your hand up just before we move into the next slide.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Look, I was hoping I picked up what you said there, but I wasn't quite sure. In terms of the water approval moving, did you say with the applicant or the landowner?
So the landowner or developer is always the applicant legally for a water approval, but you lodging an application are the agent, endorsed consultant, etc. for an application. So they still lawfully have to meet all their requirements of the water approval. If we ever take any legal action, it's against them as the applicant on an application.
Yeah. No, sorry. The distinction I'm trying to make, because I didn't think you had to be the landowner to be an applicant. So in the instance that I'm going to use the word developer, which is not a thing that you're talking about, but the developer doesn't at that point in time own the land, but wants to submit an application. We do that as their agent. You know, where does that water approval sit with? Does it sit with that applicant or does it sit with the landowner?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, and yes, the developer can be an applicant. You just need to show that they are like when we go through and do owner's consent, etc. You need to show them as the applicant. So obviously you're not the applicant, and that's where there's been some confusion over time of the endorsed consultant lodging becoming the applicant. Obviously, we can't hold you for an ICN charge or the legal requirements of the water approval, but we can hold the developer or the owner, etc. So the developer, and where you read it through the Act and NetServe, etc., has that clarity of the developer can be the applicant, the owner can be the applicant. Mm-hmm. That make enough sense?
I think so. Yeah, I'm just wondering. You know, like developer sells the land.
Yeah.
He might take possession, or he sells the land. Does it stay with him, or does the water approval move to the new landowner?
Yeah, it goes to the new landowner when the land's sold. So, and that's where there's a bit of legality, but we will provide more and more clarification over the coming months around this because it's going to change. It's going to improve in our system development, etc. over time. So there'll be watch this space. There'll be a lot more clarification around that.
Thank you.
No problems. Thanks. All right, so the third-party certification scheme. So some of you are new to the scheme, some of you have been around for a while, and this is just a bit of a refresh for those who have been around for a while to make sure you're across how we're operating, and for the newcomers, making sure you understand the urban utilities process. So obviously the application is lodged to urban utilities. It can be lodged by anyone. And then we will assess and approve the application as per our legislative requirements. When we issue the water approval decision notice, that will condition, if the water approval is a minor works or a major works for a non-standard connection. Minor works, that's when a endorsed consultant is involved, and that is where the ongoing process after the decision notice requires an endorsed consultant. So the endorsed consultant, as in your role, you certify the design, the construction, and the ensure the compliance is through meeting the requirements under that water approval through the conditions, making sure you're meeting the SEQ code and any of our requirements under the guidelines. That continues on through to the compliance and off maintenance stage. So then once you have completed construction, you lodge the compliance package via our portal, and we'll go through a bit more detail around this. And then urban utilities manage the compliance and issue the connection certificate. So we're going through and doing all the checks against the water approval, checking the ASCONs against the the code requirements. And then once all of the requirements have been met, we'll issue a connection certificate, which enables legal use of our network and connection for the customer. So up until that point, it's not actually a legal use of a connection. And that's important around things like infrastructure charges, use, maintenance, etc. of our network. So we're across what actual assets are being utilized in our network. Under this program, we will administer the scheme through the endorsement process. So you've now gone through the expression of interest to become endorsed. We will have ongoing expression of interest during the scheme for consultants to continue to join the scheme. And we maintain that register of the consultants and the ongoing performance management. So we will publish the register on our website, and it's now live with the current list. And we continue to audit your work. So I'll talk a bit more soon about the performance management, the auditing, and how we'll manage the scheme. And we collaborate with endorsed consultants. So again, soon I'll be talking a bit more about how we're changing some of that collaboration from what we've done in the past, but it is a two-way conversation. We don't just sit there and constantly tell you how to do your job. We appreciate that you're very experienced engineers and companies that have good ideas on how we can change and improve as well. And we take on that feedback on how we continue to improve the way that we work and how we can improve the program for you as well. If my slide pack will move. So going into a bit more of the detailed level around the process. So in design and certification, so prior to lodgement, excuse me, it's important to carry out thorough investigations and have correct advice for developing the design. Utilizing our external GIS login that we provide to all endorsed consultants, engineering searches, service advice notices, utilizing that research, making sure that you're looking for easements existing and any new requirements, any issues with combined drains on the site, making sure you secure neighbours' consent if you and informing them that there could be an easement required if that comes about. All these things help later on when you're going through the design and construction stage, making sure you've got the design correct up front, no surprises for neighbours that result in complaints, etc. that come up. You then go into the design stage, and this is all after the decision notice has been issued. You've done preliminary design for the water approval, excuse me, and then you're in this design stage. And making sure you've got the necessary inputs to complete the design with adequate information to enable construction. So making sure you've done those detailed site investigations, checking survey, service locations, geotech on the site. We don't want to be having to rush through at the construction phase because you found that there was a power pole or an extra tree that you didn't realize was there because it wasn't what you had seen through Google search. It's getting out to site and having a look at these sites and finding these things, or being aware of other designs that are happening for the development so things don't get installed in a location that you weren't aware that was going to be installed. Making sure that any third-party approvals like build over asset, structural engineering, certification, hydraulic engineering, etc., is available to you. And that includes things like, as I mentioned, architectural design, etc., on the site, so you know that there's actually the correct location for meter assembly, etc. And make sure you see our standards and guidelines on our website for further guidance, but also engage with us where you've got needing further clarification. So we do have the minor works construction and compliance guidelines available on our website. And this is a bit like what our website looks like at present. So we have extensive information around standards and guidelines on our website. There's a lot of different sources of information for you to be able to review. And we do keep the updated dates on those when we announce when we make revisions of any of these documents to assist to make sure that you're continuing to stay informed on our current requirements. So we understand that sometimes you can't always stick to the code when you're doing design on some of these developments. And obviously we prefer you to always do the code, but sometimes it's just not practical. So where you cannot achieve code compliance, we ask you to apply early for a design variation. Don't wait until right when the construction's about to start. The earlier you get in, the more time you're enabled for us to be able to clearly assess it and come up with a suitable solution with you. Make sure any submission to us is sufficiently detailed of why the design variation is required and what information you have at hand to be able to support that justification around the design variation. Refer to what it is that's actually being changed in your design to be able to get it around so we know where to look and review. If we approve the design variation, make sure you do read the conditions of the acceptance. Sometimes that's going to change what you've already proposed, and make sure you update your designs and load a fresh design package into the application portal so it's available for during the construction phase for any auditing, etc. If you're at site and construction is happening, a construction variation may be required. And obviously at this stage, we want to minimize the delays when during construction. We understand that there's cost of having contractors on site and disruption to our communities when you've got roads excavated, etc. So it's always important to ask permission rather than forgiveness. Don't wait until the ASCON phase to say, by the way, we changed all this. We have various means of being able to get assistance. Excuse me. During the construction, we do have Michael McCann, who's been in this session as well. He's in our compliance team as our senior technical advisor. Our compliance team can assist, but also our assurance officers out in the field. They can assist providing information. They're allocated to each job, so they can provide contact information, etc., for you to be able to bounce off in those instances. Make sure that any decision that's made during construction is recorded so you can lodge that with your as constructed package so our compliance team can see that information that has been accepted. Obviously, it's important to minimize the amount of variations during construction, and that's why it's important to get your design and design variations sorted out early. So part of our performance management of the scheme is making sure that the design quality is meeting our requirements and always improving. So it's all about continuous improvement, and we want to continue to see the improvement of design across the scheme and minimizing the non-conformances. So what we do is we do design audits. Now, this is around checking quality management. We're checking you're meeting the requirements of the code in those designs, you're meeting the scheme guidelines. So we will carry out design audits potentially along the way on your applications. We don't check every single design that you lodge. It's only on a audit basis. Excuse me. So the occurrence could be random, and we do a random selection process. If an application is flagged due to concerns internally or from a customer complaint, etc., we may audit for those purposes. And sometimes if we've got ongoing non-conformance issues, we may have a more targeted audit process. The idea of design audits isn't to constantly beat you with a bat. It is to provide ongoing education and feedback on your designs so you can see where there's been errors along the way and areas of improvement. We expect you to take that feedback on and look at your internal improvement processes to ensure that you don't continue to have those issues continuing in your designs, and making sure that that ongoing applications, if you've got other applications in, you don't have the same errors. Obviously, two-way conversation. So if you need to have further clarification around any of the audits, or if you've got feedback on any of the audits, ensure you come back to us and we can work through them with you. So now I'm going to hand over to Lawrence. He's going to talk about the construction stage of the process and the ASCON package.
Thanks, Michael. So good morning, everyone. So yeah, my name is Lawrence and I'm one of the engineers in the compliance team. So I'd like to just spend a few minutes over the next couple of slides just to talk about our expectations of our ECs in the construction and post-construction / compliance stages. So like Erin and Michael have said earlier, I guess the core function of the endorsed consultant is to provide certification. So one, certification of the design, and two, certification of construction. So in order for us at Urban Utilities to have confidence in your certification, we really need you to provide a transparent picture, essentially of what's gone in the ground, because you are our eyes, ears, and boots on the ground, essentially. So straight off the bat, I'd like to air this out. I think it's the last point on the slide. But number one, our assurance officers do undertake site audits from time to time. But just because they do that, it doesn't relegate the need for our endorsed consultants to do your own site inspections. So you yourselves can be satisfied with the things that you're certifying. So that's one. And number two is a general letter saying, we've been to site and we've inspected doesn't constitute site inspections. So just some tips. We do suggest that you do develop a checklist. So we have seen in the past that some endorsed consultants have developed a check sheet. You can use the SEQ code. There is a clause in 4.4 in the AIS that provides detail as to what should be inspected on site. But essentially, it's critical infrastructure. So things obviously before backfilling, critical items that obviously we can't see once it's been backfilled. So these things we do ask that you do take photos of and you provide comment as to what it is, changes and things like that. Just make sure that you also set the expectation with your contractor and your client that before breaking ground that we have this expectation of undertaking these site inspections. So just make sure that you let the contractor know, you let your client know that you have these witness points or these hold points. Also, just make sure that you make time for on maintenance and off maintenance inspections, because at the end, for example, at end of maintenance, we do ask that you provide end of maintenance certification to us. And if this isn't completed, then the defects liability still remains with the developer. So we'll jump to the next slide, Michael. So like I said before, Urban Utilities does perform site audits from time to time. So these are for these reasons, so that we can actually understand and see that our ECs do have a presence on site and are maintaining quality and safety. It's so that we can be assured that the assets going in the ground obviously have serviceability and are code compliant. It's also a great opportunity because our AOs, our assurance officers on the site, do have a wealth of experience. So it is a great opportunity to provide or to receive feedback and education and to just get over little hurdles that you might encounter on site. So they don't happen all the time, but it is risk-based. It is targeted if there are performance issues or performance management that is required to be undertaken. So we'll jump to the next slide, please, Michael. So just on the next 4 slides, I'd like to cover the as constructed stage. So once everything's been completed, we ask that you provide us with an as constructed package. So we do have this check sheet or certification that's just a 4-pager that provides your certification and all the as constructed information to us for review. So the reason why we do this is obviously so we have confidence in the assets that are going into the ground. And the best tip that we can give to you is the more transparent you are with us, then it just streamlines the whole process. The more information you give us, if there are things that are non-compliant, just provide commentary on it, and then we can make that assessment at the compliance stage. Rather than being left in the dark, then we have to go through that back and forth of RFIs. So help us help you. We'll go to the next slide, please. So when should it be provided to us. So obviously everything has to be practically complete. So we do ask within 45 calendar days, you do provide us with this package. Just make sure before you do provide us with the ACP that all ancillary approvals are made and obtained prior to submission. So for example, if you need easements, make sure you get your easements in before you provide us with the as constructed package certification. So like Michael said before, it just ensures once we've reviewed all this information, you can commence legal use of our network. And any time prior to this is obviously, it's not legal. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So what needs to be provided? So like I said, this sheet, or this document, sorry, is a really good check sheet that you can just go through and see what is required, but obviously make sure that the contractor is aware that these documents and these test reports, photos, site inspections are required before breaking ground, because the worst thing that can happen is you get to the end of construction and then you're missing a test report, you're missing a concrete report, for example. So just make sure you have all these documents, CCTV as is relevant, your drawings, ADAC survey if relevant, backtoes and things like that. We'll go to the next slide, please, Michael. And how do we do it? So we do have a developer applications portal, which we do ask you to provide a consolidated package to us. We do understand that we do have a file size limitation of 10 megabytes. So if it is too large to go onto the portal, we do ask that you index them so you can separate them out. So for example, you can provide all the drawings in one package or in one file, or your test reports in one file, or your CCTV in one file. If your CCTV does exceed the 10 megabyte, then you can provide it in a share file. So for example, on Dropbox or Google Drive, and then share with us the link. Just the thing to note, because admittedly our systems are a little bit archaic, it's a work in progress. So once you, so just wait for the car. Once you do provide those documents on the portal, please do email us at development.compliance. So we do know that those files are there and ready for us to review. So if you do need any help, there is a really good, or there are a lot of good materials on our website. There is a little video on our website as well as YouTube that explains this as constructed form. But by all means, if you have any issues, please do reach out and we're more than happy to help. So I'll pass the time back to Michael.
Just sorry, delay for waiting for it to unmute on me. All right, so obviously we've had comments about working together. So this is the first of the onboarding training that we'll be running over the coming weeks, but training doesn't stop here. We will have ongoing training sessions through the scheme. Similar to how we used to run forums in the past about enabling information to be able to be discussed with Endorsed consultants. Instead of bringing everyone together all the time into big, large events and the logistics around that of trying to get everyone into one location, we will transform that into more lunch and learn sessions where specialists within our business will be able to provide information around process of water approvals, areas that we're seeing, excuse me, some issues along the way, and also around the design components, code changes, etc. that come up. So we'll have ongoing sessions throughout the period of the scheme. The regular auditing of design, construction, and compliance submissions on off maintenance, those are a conversation piece. It's about giving feedback to you, but also having commentary come back at times, and that forms part of our performance management to ensure that the quality is continued for the scheme. And then we'll have annual review meetings. So what we'll be doing is each endorsed consultant will have a meeting with either myself or someone within the scheme management to review how you're going, any feedback that we've got for you, but also feedback from you back to us. So we found that when we've had these kind of sessions, it's worked really well for the conversation between the parties to ensure that you are doing things correctly under the scheme, you're understanding the scheme correctly, and you're keeping up with the volumes of applications, etc., that are required to ensure that when we get through the review stage, there's no surprises. So unfortunately, sometimes there's non-conformances with design audits or even site audits. So we issue the audit report out to yourself, and it's detailing if it's a minor or a major non-conformance. So obviously we'll also issue out any auditing that are compliant as well. So minor non-conformances, the way we see it is the works can continue. There is action required from the endorsed consultant that is going to change designs, etc. And this will prevent any delays at the compliance stage. So that's your opportunity to fix things up. It's still minor in nature, but could cause delays later or could cause things to be constructed incorrectly. Whereas if we issue a major non-conformance, our recommendation is you stop the work. If there's construction happening, you stop it, you mitigate the risk, and take immediate action. So we do require a corrective action report to be developed and sent to us. And we're going to review the corrective action reports with the non-conformances and ensure that you've put adequate controls to ensure that you don't continue to have these issues in future. A major non-conformance does result in a formal non-conformance under the deed. So if you receive 3 major non-conformances, that will result us in issuing a show cause to you. A significant breach of the deed can also result in a show cause, and it may result just in instant removal of your endorsement, depending on the nature of the breach. If you receive a show cause notice, you need to submit us a justification of why your endorsement should remain. And it needs to have demonstrated and measurable improvements that we can actually review, excuse me, manage and check in across our auditing program to ensure that you have taken on those measures. And that will be through a probation period of time. It will also be taken into account of part of our ongoing review on renewal of endorsement. If you fail to meet the requirements of any show cause, or the outcomes from that show cause, it will result in a removal of endorsement for you. So around our engagement and collaboration, so as we've mentioned, it's a two-way conversation. So we do want to have that continued conversation with you. We do meet with endorsed consultants, so one consultant per week is in our program plan to be able to talk to. Obviously, that won't start immediately. We want to have a little bit of time to be able to get things settled in on the scheme and for you to get established, but then we'll set up a program of meeting with people ongoing. The training and education forums that we're going to, excuse me, we'll be providing along the way. And we want feedback from endorsed consultants on process and other improvements. So not just through these conversations and through forums, but when we're implementing changes, we often request feedback from consultants. So we request different consultants at times to provide feedback on some of our changes and how you think that will work and won't work, so we can ensure that any process that we roll out from the organisation takes into account how consultants are working outside. We have created a dedicated email address. You would have been receiving some communications from it already, endorsconsultant@urbanutilities.com.au. That's for around the improvements, process clarifications, around our auditing information, so audit responses and us issuing audits out from design. It's not to replace any of the email addresses that we use for process along the way. So if during the assessment stage, then compliance stage, auditing, etc., don't use the endorsed consultant email address. Continue to use those email addresses we've got on during those processes. And we issue regular newsletters and blasts of information at times when there's something important to get out. Make sure you're subscribed to those newsletters. It doesn't have to be just the primary contact that subscribes. Everyone in the organization that needs to receive this information can subscribe, and we get that out. It means that you're not relying on someone forwarding it out and missing important updates. So a bit of other information that I need to talk through. So we have noticed in the past that some companies use the Urban Utilities logo on the website and email signatures, etc. We don't actually give permission to use our logo and can't actually allow you to use our logo. So happy for you to mention that you're an endorsed consultant on this scheme, but please don't use our logo on any of your information. Any inquiries, as I've mentioned, can come to our endorsed consultant email address, but for any general development inquiries, continue to use our developmentinquiries@urbanutilities.com.au email address. That team can either answer or forward on to someone that can provide an answer for you pretty efficiently. So a bit of information on what's coming up. So we've got two more training sessions that will be coming up, and the next one will be excuse me, in a couple of weeks, the minor works application process and your role in it. So that goes through the journey of a minor works application from start to end, and talking you through the steps that Urban Utilities are actioning and yourself are actioning as endorsed consultants, and just making sure that everyone is understanding that consistency of the process. So a bit of a re-education for some and new for others. Our third session is on the customer experience, and we understand that your customers are important to you, but they're also important to us because they're our customers, and we also take into account the greater community that's impacted by development. So that's actually the end of our session. So I open the floor to anyone who has any questions, but obviously understand that everyone doesn't always want to ask a question in such a large group setting. So if you do have questions that you don't want to raise now, feel free to email us via the Endorsed Consultant email address, and we can get back to you when we can. Anyone have any questions?
So does minor works need off maintenance packages?
Yes, it does. So it's the water approval does require an off maintenance. So we do require the off maintenance packages to be submitted to close out the last component of the water approval.
So Michael, we're somewhat behind on them under the old scheme. This is a new scheme. Do we have to do the old ones?
Let's just say that we probably know that a lot of people are behind on the old ones, and we have been doing follow-up on those. So our compliance team have been doing some chasing, but yes, there is a significant backlog from everybody. We would appreciate if you could start working through some of them, but at some stage we may have to take a risk-based approach on some of those due to the volumes, but no official statement on that right now. So if you can work out a way of trying to close some of them out, would be great.
we scheduled in 2 weeks' time. I've got two guys on it.
Awesome. Yeah. And obviously that opens up risk to developers while they're still not closed out, because if we have complaints come in of sinkage, etc. like that, it's more relevant for us to still go back and have that rectified. Whereas if there's an off maintenance being carried out and it was good at that point of inspection, we can, then obviously we're not going to go back to the developer because it's then off maintenance and it's fully our asset.
Michael, it might be worth also mentioning just the importance of those ASCOM packages to inform our mapping systems.
Yeah, so obviously, yeah, so obviously we encourage you to use our external GIS system, and obviously everyone else is also using that external GIS system throughout outside of Urban Utilities. Obviously internal of Urban Utilities, we use that for every single one of our field trucks to find assets and locate what's in the ground. that's used for all of the, excuse me, of dial before you dig information, etc. So it's important for us to get those ASCON packages in, because that's what goes into our GIS system. So it needs to, your ADAC and your ASCONs do need to match. That's a check that we're doing to make sure that they're matching, and further checks are happening on that going forward. That information then feeds into our GIS system as our official record of where the asset is and what's in the ground. We also have all of those ASCON drawings into our drawing management system. So the life of that asset is where we are looking at that information. So many of us won't be around when some of those assets need to be looked up. So it's important to accurately record what's actually going in the ground, providing the detail of connections, etc. And I know that a lot of people refer to the SEQ code for detail, but allow that in 50 years' time, the detail of what's in the SEQ code may not exist. So it's important to actually detail in your as constructed drawings, and I'd say even so in your design package, so they're not having to try and find code drawings in the middle of the night when the job's going on. The detail of how connections are being made, what's going in the ground, what type of sewer connection it is, etc. Because in 50 years' time, when someone's having to dig this up, when there's a break or when there's maintenance being done, that's the drawings that they're going back to, and they may not have that code to be able to look up.
Does Urban Utilities feel like holding maintenance bonds on those things to encourage developers to engage us to close these things out?
Not on the minor works. So as you can imagine, there is a lot of administration around securities, and it takes us a lot just to manage the major work securities. And it doesn't always even work on major works to encourage those off maintenance, I've got to say. So for us to administer it on a minor works scale for the thousands of applications we get a year, it's a lot of administration to add all that security management into it. So so no, we don't. We've taken a risk-based approach on minor works to have it certified by an endorsed consultant. I do acknowledge that sometimes it's hard for you to have the developer understand that that's required, and that's where we say upfront, say to the developer that you're going to need to do an off maintenance at the end of the 12 months. Up to you how you manage that commercially, or if you're charging upfront, etc. But then they're aware that that's being done. Even though the developers sold the land, etc., that off maintenance still needs to be completed for those packages. Do we have any other questions? All right, so nothing's really jumping up. I did see something come up in chat, but I think it was just around that decision notice applicant kind of conversation. My screens are running on this. Yeah. Yes. So yes, Kim. The actual approval runs with the land. The land holds the water approval. So if the land changed ownership or changes consultants or anything along the way, the land still has the water approval. So whoever is the legal owner is the person who holds that water approval and holds the responsibility of meeting those requirements. All right, so I just see Diana's just put her hand up. Yes. Just want to unmute and you can speak.
Have you got me now?
Yep, I can hear you now. Yep, it's the 2022 problem, isn't it, of unmuting?
Yes. With respect to off maintenance, so basically there's no trigger for the developer to get a bond or any money release. So it's up to us to impose on, because we'll take, basically as part of the scheme, we're responsible for ensuring the off maintenance. So to meet a contractor on site to look at the works, etc., that responsibility falls to us. So it's up to us to get whatever means in place to ensure that that occurs. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is a condition of the water approval to do the off maintenance, so you can remind them of that requirement of the water approval that they're holding. Obviously, change of land, ownership, all those things does impact some of those responsibilities, and that's hard. But yeah, so you can complete that off maintenance. Yeah, it's how you decide to commercially manage that with the developer, and different developers have different commercial intentions on some of these developments and what they're willing to do of paying for it up front so you can just continue it later, or securities with yourself, etc.
Some of them definitely don't want to pay up front. So the problem arises if they don't want to engage us to do an off maintenance. Urban utilities still require us to complete that activity, and that will go, that will be a non-conformance as up on our requirements of the Endorsed Consultant Scheme. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's important for them to understand that they don't really have a choice, that the off maintenance has to be done. And so it's a case of how you educate your customer upfront of the requirements of the whole process of the water approval. So, and that's one of the things that we will talk around in the customer training program about how you become the educator to the customer for them to understand the water approval process. So obviously we need to make sure that you're informed, so then you can inform the customer of that end-to-end process that includes off maintenance.
Yeah, no, well, I would imagine we would be requiring it, some commitment from them at the time of ASCON, especially if it's a reflection on our ability to remain in the scheme. If they choose not to do it later, we'll still have an obligation to complete it.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I saw Kim's hand go up next.
Yeah, just for Diana, what we've been doing is we actually won't put in our ASCON package for them to get the certificate of completion without them prepaying for off maintenance. It's the only way we've got a little bit of a pushback that it has to happen.
Yes, I agree that that's really the only way to do it.
Yeah, and obviously if they're well informed up front of these requirements, a lot of people do say to us, we didn't know that it needed to happen. So it's about having that education and having your commercial arrangement up front to include the full scope, so they're informed of what it's going to cost, obviously, so there's no surprises. So good point, and thanks, Kim. I'm just trying to see the hands up because it's not coming up so clearly on my screen. I've got a lag. I think it was Matthew that I saw come up next with the hands up. Just if you want to unmute.
Yeah,
if
sorry.
you've got your hand up. Yep, no problems. Yep.
Yeah, just with that, I found that there's a lot of minor works applications that are simply reuse for sewer and simply reuse for water. Are we going to be told how to commercially justify an off maintenance for reuse in both systems?
Reuse is probably a difficult one for me to answer. So Michael or Lawrence, do you have something around reuse, or do we need to come back on this one?
Yeah, look, we'll probably need to come back on that. I suppose that is a good conversation piece around and off maintenance for that just that perspective. And I think generally, we understand that this is probably something we can work on collaboratively moving forward to assist you in having that conversation with your client. What materials we can provide. Reuse is a definite good one that probably we could look at first, just to get a firmer answer for everyone on that.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thanks for that, Michael. And obviously, probably one element of a reuse is, there is a certification that it's going to last for a minimum 25 years, all those components, but and they're changing the use in that land, but we also understand that it's not always an easy one to say, well, it's an existing asset, so why is there a off maintenance period, etc., to be reviewed? So we'll work on that one a bit. Okay, now my Teams is catching up. I can see that Jeremy, you're next.
Yeah, so I was just going on, not to labour on it too much, just that conversation about the off maintenance. Obviously, the preference is to have them to pay for it up front, But for us, for our legacy projects where that's not been possible, we've taken the approach that the asset needs to be, you know, properly maintained and properly looked after. So if the client's not coming to the party, and we did have a few of those, and probably still will, we've just gone and done the audit anyway, because some of them were quite simple. And then if it passes and it can go off maintenance, well, that's fine. We can let you guys know. If there's defects and it needs to be fixed, that's when we go to the developer and say, hey, you need to fix this. By the way, you're still liable for a defective asset that's in the ground, and then we can provide, you know, evidence that's backed up by you guys. That's how we've approached it. I don't know how popular that approach is, but yeah.
And I think it's important to manage your own risk, right? So, and it's good that we're having this conversation as a group, by the way, because it's good for everyone to be informed on the way people work together on this. But it's some of this is risk based on when you've got some of these legacy ones that people aren't necessarily coming to the party of, how you can manage it with your certification, etc. around it. So yes, some of them are easy to complete. Other ones aren't so easy, and we acknowledge that, and it's working through how you can do as many as you can, etc., and get through. If you are having extreme issues with a developer and you cannot gain access and all those kind of things, we understand that these things come up. Different commercial decisions are made and all those things along the way, and it's just a case of raising those with us. Keep that communication open. Don't just take a default position that you're going to email us on every single one, so you can't get access. But if you're having significant issues and something's happened along the way that they don't want you to access the property, etc., those are the ones just to inform us of you're unable to access, and we can work through a solution on those ones, if any. Greg, you're next.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Do urban utilities maintain a register of maintenance works undertaken that we potentially could access? And where I'm coming from for this is that, you know, we're going off maintenance. You know, quite a lot of asset is buried asset. We can do, you know, a visual inspection of some things, but there's certain things we can't understand. And I just wouldn't like necessarily to be in a position of certifying something at off maintenance, and then you give me a call a week or two later, what on earth you're doing? You know, there's you know, 2 weeks ago we had maintenance crew out there having, you know, we received complaints about this issue, you know, and you know, work's definitely needed to be done.
So
I might take
Michael,
this, Michael.
Yeah, Michael, you're about to answer that one. Go for it.
Yeah, I was actually almost just going to bring it up before Greg did. So yeah, it's not just your certification that we look at when we do an off maintenance. We do go through maintenance records to see if anything has been flagged on those line segments, because, you know, we have taken ownership. So, you know, sometimes they don't know if there's a complaint. You know, they just call Urban Utilities. So sometimes we push those maintenance activities back to the developer. Sometimes, you know, development services doesn't find out about it, and our crews have just gone out and taken care of it. So, you know, we will check those maintenance records. Obviously, minor works, there's not usually a lot that does go wrong, and a majority of the time, if something is fixed, you know, it's low cost, low risk. We would only really make it a, you know, if it's something that we think is going to keep being a defect, we would alert at off maintenance time if we find it during those checks. So,
and obviously sorry, Mike, I was just going to say, obviously, if we have things that come up during the time that we are informed of, we will come back to you as an Endorsed consultant, as well as the contractor, to say, hey, this has been raised, like road restoration, footpath restoration, etc. The reports, like the information on the asset, isn't so easy to get, Greg. So to answer your kind of question of could we probably be able to get this information out to you prior to doing a certification, for the volume of applications we do and the searches required to do that, it's probably not a practical thing to be able to expose that information to you at the moment. Who knows what could happen in the future? We're working on lots of system improvements over the coming years, but at present, it's probably not something we could sit there and say, if you looked up the asset in GIS or if you looked up the application in our system, that you would see the maintenance. It's just not as easy as that at times, that sometimes we even do the search and miss some of the stuff that's going on. So but we are taking into your certification is what you can see at the time and what you can see of the quality of things like compaction of the ground that's resulted in road that's sunk or something along those lines, or obvious things that the manhole's been smashed or the meters all of a sudden aren't there. Those kind of the components are what we're looking for in those off maintenance. John Neal, you're there.
Yeah, sorry, look, just probably looping around to my initial comments about off-maintenance bonds, guys. We sort of clearly spoke a lot about the off-maintenance process, and for us as consultants, it is one of the main pain points because it's bordering on impossible with a lot of developers to actually action it, given transfer of properties and closed user of entities and all the rest of it. Like some of the guys have touched on, prepayment is about the only option, and that's always quite often not an option. It doesn't solve it. And I understand from your point of view, bonding might be hard and holding bonds, but surely there's a way to charge an off-maintenance fee as part of the overall fee structure from your point of view that gives some capital value in there to be able to go and do these works. Because the response just to say, oh, it's your problem to deal out commercially with your client doesn't solve the problem. It pushes it to the side, and we end up having all these conversations and trying to find back ways to solve things that doesn't really solve the structural embedded problem of not having a maintenance bond. It's been right from the start of the scheme. It wasn't in there. It's something we raised a long time ago. Yeah, I would love to talk about it more and see if there's another way to solve it.
Yeah, I think we might keep it as a talking point around the off maintenance and how solutions are. Like obviously, the intent of a minor works workflow with certification scheme is to reduce some of those burdens on customers and charging a fee. Do we have to then refund the fee and all those kind of things like a security? We've had ongoing conversations internally around the best way of dealing with that maintenance period, and we're dealing. And there's some components of what we have to deal with around our net serve, etc., for that, as well as code requirements. So I think we'll keep the conversation going on it. No solution going to obviously happen here, but other than bear it in mind when you're talking to customers at the moment of those requirements, and that keeping that conversation with them of they have this liability of the asset for 12 months from connection certificate. So number one, get the connection certificate as fast as they can so they can have legal use, but also so their maintenance period starts. When we issue a connection certificate 2 years after construction, that's extending their time of having to take the liability of that asset to 3 years. So obviously that's another component of bring it in. We need that asset information earlier so we can have accurate records of our network. All those elements, getting that story together.
Completely get it, completely understand it's important. Like the guys have said, we've spent a lot of time doing it off our own bat and not recovering funds for it. Yeah. It's just we've got no capability to enforce anything. You as the entity do is what is my point, right? So if you want a consistent resolution, it's got to be charged at that water approval stage to get a mechanism in there to resolve it. Otherwise, we'll do our best, and hands up, we do our best, and we have it has cost us time and energy to do it, and we'll continue to do that, but it doesn't solve the problem structurally from my point of view.
Yeah. No, I think it's good feedback, and something that we definitely need to take into account with some of our process designs, etc., and how we manage things. So definitely, it's something that we'll have discussions within the business as well, and talk to some of you along the way to see how any solution can kind of develop.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Do we have any other questions? A couple of hands up is just from previous questions. Is there anything else?
Well, we've done very well, Michael. Lots of great questions this morning. We are now over time.
Yep. All right. So what we'll do is finish up. If you do have any questions, clarifications, etc., feel free to email us via the Endorsed Consultant email address. But otherwise, really appreciate your time coming to this first session. Keep an eye out for the invite for our next session, and which will be in a couple of weeks at this stage. But otherwise, as of tomorrow, the scheme goes live with all of our new list of endorsed consultants, and wish you well. And thanks for being on board with us. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers.